Welcome to LR3 Lesson 5. In this lesson, you will learn how to write triangle congruency proofs. So in this lesson, what we're going to do is we're going to take the ideas from the two-column algebra proofs that we did in LR3-2 and the thoughts from LR3 Lesson 3 and 4 with those triangle congruency shortcuts, and we're going to put them together to do some proofs related to triangle congruency. So the first thing that we're going to do is step 1, which is going to be to find and list 3 congruent parts. So let's remember from LR3, lessons 3 and 4, that we learned that the ones that work are side, 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 angle, side, angle, side, angle, and side, angle, angle. These are the ones that we can use. So the second step will be then is to name the congruent triangles. So this triangle is congruent to this triangle, and the reasoning will be one of our triangle shortcuts. All right, let's take a look at our first example. So we are given that AB is congruent to BC and BD bisects angle ABC. We need to prove that triangle ABD is congruent to triangle CBD. So first, let's look at our given. And we are going to mark in our picture here that AB is congruent to BC. So I'm going to find AB, this, and I know that that's congruent to BC because that's given. Now let's look at how BD bisects triangle angle ABC. So angle ABC is this angle here. And I can see that BD, that whole line, bisects angle ABC. So what do I know about those two smaller angles? Well, we know that those two smaller angles are going to be congruent because it is bisected. So I'm going to mark that this angle is congruent to this angle. They don't tell us anything else, but I'm going to highlight over these triangles, the two different triangles. Is there anything that got highlighted twice? So something that got green and yellow. And that would be BD, that middle line. This shows us that BD, it's the same exact line in both triangles. It's the same length, so it is congruent to itself. We have marked up our picture. We now know that these two are congruent. So now we're going to go over to our two columns over here and write it as a proof. So let's start with AB. Number 1, AB is congruent to BC. I like to color code these. You do not have to, but you do need to write the numbers in. How did I know this? Well, it was written right over here. It was given to us. All right, now the next thing, I know you may want to look at those two angles, 1 and 2, and right away say that they are congruent, but we cannot because we weren't given that those two angles were congruent. What we were given was that BD bisects angle ABC. So we have to write that out first. Now I can say that angle 1 is congruent to angle 2. If I look at my picture, I have angle 1 and angle 2 written. But if I didn't have that written there, I would have no idea. As I look at that, I'd have no idea what angle 1 and angle 2 are. So in this unit, it is really important that you're being very clear and you're writing everything out. If you, in this case, didn't want to write the 1s and the 2 in those two angles, what you need to do then is you'd need to say angle ABD is congruent to angle CBD. And that would be okay as well. In my opinion, it's easier to just write the 1 and the 2. Now, there are 2 ways you could go about giving the reason for this. The first one would be, we know that BD bisects angle ABC. The only reason I can write that there is because we have already established it up here in a statement. If I didn't have that established, I wouldn't have been able to give that reason. So that is why it is very important that step 2 is already there before we got to step 3. The other reason you could give would be that this is the definition of the angle bisector. Either reason I will accept, but either way, you have to have the fact that BD bisects triangle or angle ABC prior to this step. We have to establish it before we can use it. All right, and the last thing that we found is that BD is congruent to BD. For our reasoning, we again have a choice. We could just say, because it's the same side, this is not something that was given. It wasn't marked in the picture. It wasn't written out in our given statements. We had to actually figure out and realize that it was the same side. If you want to use more mathematical terms, this is actually the reflexive property. Means the same thing, and I will accept either reason. At this point, I can see that I have a side, I have an angle, and I have another side. So I have my three parts, and I am ready to write my congruency statement. When we start writing it, we always start with whatever is given first. So we're going to call it triangle ABD. And now instead of just blindly copying the other part, I'm going to make sure that I truly proved it correctly. So first I can look and I can see that A corresponds with C. I can see that B corresponds with itself. And same thing with D. D corresponds with itself. So we have C, B, D. It is really important to do this step. I know it may seem like an unnecessary step, but it could have told you to prove that ABD is congruent to DBC, which actually wouldn't have been true. So this is very important to make sure. And if that were to be the case, what would happen is you'd say it cannot be determined. Now we need to give our reason here. What did we use? What shortcut did we use? And that was side, angle, side. Notice here that in triangle ABD, we see side, angle, side. And in triangle CBD, we also see side, angle, side. And that is our reasoning. If they weren't both side, angle, side, then it would not be able to be determined. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge. You will see this on your homework. So again, you have to make sure that they're same shortcut in both triangles. All right, let's take a look at our next example here. I like to use color coding to help. You don't need to if you don't want to. So here I can see that G is congruent to I because that was marked for us. We know A is congruent to O. Again, they marked it for us. And finally, we know that these sides are congruent because again, they marked it for us. At this point, I can see that I have the three things that I need. So we are going to start with our statements. I'm going to start with what was marked. So angle G was congruent to angle I. And the reason it was given to us, in that picture, it was marked. We were also given, so the second thing was that angle A was congruent to angle O. Again, this was given to us. In the picture, it was marked. And the third thing is that SA is congruent to LO. And again, it was marked. It was given to us. We have our three congruent parts. So now we're ready for our congruency statement. And again, remember, we have to start with the first one. So triangle GAS is congruent to, now instead of just writing what we're told to prove, we're going to make sure that it's actually true. So I can see G corresponds with I, A corresponds with O, S corresponds with L. And then I'm going to look and I'm going to see, oh, yep, in fact, that's what we wanted to prove. And the reason is the shortcut that we used. This is side, angle, angle. It is the same thing if you were to say angle, angle, side, same exact thing. One is written forward, one is written backwards. Either way is fine. All right, let's take a look at our next one. So again, here we're given pictures, and I'm going to draw in. I see that this side, TS, is congruent to OS. That's marked there. I can also see that these two angles are congruent, and I'm going to actually label them 1 and 2. That's going to help us in our proof. As I look at this, I then want to consider, is there anything else that I know that is congruent? Well, I can see that SA, it's the same line in both, so it's congruent to itself. Now, since I have those three parts, I'm ready to just list everything out. And remember, we always start with what is given. So my first statement, I am going to say that TS is congruent to OS. That was given. Remember those tick marks? It was shown in the picture. The second thing that I was given is that angle 1 is congruent to angle 2. I'm actually going to call it angle 2 is congruent to angle 1. And this was given. Now, if you did not label those angles 1 and 2, you would need to give me their actual names. Angle OSA and then angle TSA. Angle TSA and angle OSA, which is why I like to use the numbers. It's just a little bit quicker. Now, you might be wondering, does it matter which order the givens go in? And it doesn't. It really doesn't matter which one you put first and which one you put second. Anything that you're given can go in any order. And the last thing that we know is that SA is congruent to SA because it is the same side. Remember, you could use the reflexive property. Either one would be great. All right, I have my three congruent parts, so now I can list out that my triangles are congruent. So I have triangle SAT, and that is going to be congruent to, now let's double check. Let's not just use what it shows in the proof. We got to make sure. So S corresponds with S, A corresponds with A, and T corresponds with O. So triangle SAO. And which did we use? We used side, angle, side. All right, let's take a look at this next one. Let's look at our picture. I can see here that these two angles are congruent and they're given, and I'm going to use numbers again. So I'm going to call this one 1, and I'm going to call this one 2. Then I know angle L and angle W are the same, so I'm going to call that 3, and I'm going to call that 4. Then I'm going to consider what else might I know what is in both triangles, and I can see here that WL is congruent to itself. It's in both triangles. As I look, I have my three congruent parts, so I'm ready for my proof. The first thing that I am given is that angle 1 is congruent to angle 2. The only reason I can use the 1 and the 2 is because I drew it in my picture. If you did not, you would need to give me the letters. The reason for this is it is given. All right, and the next thing, angle 3 is congruent to angle 4. This is given. And finally, step 3, WL is congruent to WL, and this is because it's the same side, or you can use the reflexive property. We have three parts that are congruent, so we are ready for our triangle congruency. Triangle LAW is congruent to triangle. L corresponds with L over here, matches up with W in the other triangle. A matches up with K, and then W matches up with L. I'm double checking. I look and I see that that is the order that I was asked to prove. And I look to see what shortcut did I use. I had an angle, I had the side, and then I had the angle. So angle, side, angle. All right, I'm going to take a moment to give you some hints and some tips. So let's say I had something like this. I could say that these two angles were congruent. Why are they congruent? They are congruent because of vertical angles. Let's say now I said that these two lines were parallel. That tells me that those two angles are going to be congruent. And that is because of alternate interior angles. They are congruent. Now, when you put this in a proof, okay, it is important in what you must do. Let's say I had this A, B, C, and D. I first have to say that AB is parallel to CD. That has to come first. Then, once that's given, I can say that angle A is congruent to angle D. And the reason here would be that they're alternate interior angles that are congruent. Finally, let's remember that just because these two are given as parallel does not mean that they're necessarily congruent. Just means that they're parallel. They may be, but you can't know for sure unless you're also told that they're congruent.